Ryan Ray and Ben Samuels present Bring in the Closers, a podcast on making deals and doing business.
Welcome to another edition of Bring in the Closers. Ryan Ray alongside Ben Samuels. Ben, the question that's been circling around the interwebs for probably 2 or 3 weeks now is, will these two make it to 10 episodes? This is episode 9. I'm not exactly sure we're going to make it to 10, but just wanted to get your raw reaction. Can we get a nice 10-piece out of this podcast experiment?
I would highly recommend that we have Nate cut this episode in 30-minute segments and release them in 2 parts, and so that we can at least guarantee to get to 10. I think we might be able to get there, but I think we should go this safe route. I don't know.
Take this divided by 2 and put it, 9 and 10.
Maybe we could do this one and then like a greatest hits and have that be the 10.
Oh, there you go. Oh, there you go. I like that. That's the best idea you've had 9 episodes in. Look at you. We should stop now. See, you've ruined it. You have peaked. Why would we do 10? Oh man. Oh, you messed it up. I was excited, then you peaked with that great insight. So what's going on, buddy? How's it's Monday morning or Monday afternoon, obviously. How's the last week treated you?
It's going fantastic. I woke up early this morning ready to rock and roll. Got a couple of deals that are coming together. Got one pretty big one that I'm excited about coming together. Hopefully here we're looking at about a September 27 close, somewhere in there. And so having fun. Looking forward to the fall, winter. I'm signed a lease new lease in Midland starting November 1. So I'll be moving and having all that sorts of fun. I'm going out to Japan here in in about a month actually. And then when I come back from Japan, I'll be moving to a new apartment. So.
Well, that's breaking news. Breaking news. Ben Samuels going to Japan. Wow. Well, I'm going to break some news that you did know, because friends usually share kind of cool stuff like that. I am on the Bush China Foundation, and so we'll be talking about that some. Might have some deal information on how to do deals with China. It's good to see Ben will be going to Japan. I'm curious to hear more about that. You did mention that you are considering going, but you never told me you were going for sure. So there will be a big event in Houston, late October for the Bush China event. Anyways, I'll be linking to that in the show notes. So if you're interested in doing deals in China with the Chinese nationals, hit me up. There's a lot of exciting stuff there, which leads me to, we have Mark LaCour coming on. If you're not familiar with Mark, he has various podcasts and extensive background in the oil and gas industry. I'll let him break that down some. But Ben, it leads me to something that I posted on LinkedIn the other day, which was something to the effect of, have a great idea, vet it internally. I wish I could see your face while I'm talking. Reformat the idea, think it's great, send it to you, you shoot it down, and then I cry or something like that, which is pretty close to how it happens. But it got me thinking. One of the things.
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story, right, Ryan?
That's exactly right. The reality is I have a great idea. I pitch it to you. You shoot it down. 3 weeks later, you repackage it, pitch it back to me as a great idea, and then get mad when I say, well, that's exactly what I told you. But whatever. Well, whatever. One of the things
I assume you're getting somewhere, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to. It's with 10 episodes. So. Nate, cut it up. Cut it up.
How did you get to 100 plus on some of these others? I'm curious. I had Josh.
Yeah, I had quality co-hosts on those, so made it a little bit easier. Matter of fact, we had a review from someone on the Texas Oil and Gas podcast talking about how good the co-host was, from a B. Samuels 1709 or something. But anyways, with that being said, let's talk about that. We've touched on this idea loosely a few episodes back about how do we expand into new markets and stuff. But I am curious, as you are looking to go to Japan or, maybe operate in different spaces, one of the things it seems like me and you are regularly talking about is, offline at least, is, what about this idea? What about this idea? And there's something to be said for the brainstorming, and there's something to be said for the executing. When do you think, when you're trying to put together, a pitch to go to a new marketplace, in your mind, what has to be in place before you think, you know what, I'm ready to go execute deals in a new space, with a new company, with a new area? How does that process work for you internally? Is it, do you have a core group of friends you go to? Is it you write down a long business plan? I'm curious, how do you walk through that process when you're trying to enter in something new?
Enter in from an advisory capacity, or actually like a business that I'm looking to start myself and going to be either self-funding or bringing in equity partners?
Well, let's start with the advisory capacity, and then we can go to the other one.
So in an advisory capacity, what I make sure to do, because what I think speaks to what I'm trying to put out as my brand, what I try to do is make sure that, if I'm purporting to be an industry expert, or if I'm purporting to know X, Y, or Z about certain subject, that I can actually deliver on that subject, and that I can actually deliver value to stakeholders, whether that be people, industry people, or or investment people. I think there's a lot of people in the business that you and I are in, I'll call it that, or a lot of people that try to broker deals or try to do things of that nature, that will tell you they're an industry expert, or they'll try to do this quote unquote fake it till you make it model that I really try to fight against and go the other route. And so I think from a basic level, it's really just about having a mastery of the subject matter, and being able to and also if I don't have good quality, high quality contacts that I can put those people in front of, I'm not going to waste their time. I'm going to wait until I've gotten enough or learned enough to be able to make the contacts, and then kind of grow from there. So it's a slower process than some maybe may employ, but I think on the back end it pays dividends.
So let me ask you this: when you talk about acquiring knowledge and learning and trying to understand things before you go into new areas, when you're doing those things, there is, like, if you wanted to work with E&P companies, it's not so much that, okay, hey, there's certain things. There's a lot of things that E&P companies do that can be very, very technical. So what is that balance like? Because when I hear what you're saying, I'm like, okay, I can appreciate that. But there's also, you can spend years and not be an expert really in working with E&P companies, just to use that as an example.
So yeah, I love these questions that we break, that we get into. But to be honest with you, this is another example. I've said this a couple of other times. This question is, I could go so many different ways to answer it. In answer to what I think what we're trying to get at is, so I don't mean necessarily having a technical mastery of all of the ins and outs of the technical knowledge. I'm talking about more about being able to. So if I'm talking to, let me just give you an example. If I'm talking to a midstream company and they're Fairway, and what they do is recycle produced water on site to fresh water to then funnel back into hydraulic fracturing operations. That's what they do. Okay. I don't need to know the science of how it works. I don't need to know the drilling of how it's drilled. I don't need to know the capacities. I don't need to know from the operational standpoint. What I do need to know is, what's the value add to their customer base? Who are they trying to get in front of? How can I try to get them in front of who they're trying to network with? What value can I bring to those relationships? So I'm not concerned with the business, like the technical business. That's irrelevant to where I'm stepping into this from. And so, but that being said, though, I can't very well come to a midstream group, this group that does the water recycling, and purport to be able to help facilitate good quality relationships and introductions for them, unless I have at least a working knowledge of the industry as a whole. And so I'm not talking about knowing the intricacies of how one company or another drills, or even the intricacies of how it's done, having a base knowledge to be able to have a conversation, to be able to put yourself in those shoes. Because I think what's valuable is to be able to hear what they're telling you in terms of what they're looking for, but then to be able to synthesize that and then regurgitate that to your network and to be able to facilitate. And so it kind of takes both sides.
So could you say it like this, maybe understanding the value chain and where they are at in the value chain, who precedes them and who comes after them? Because once you kind of understand, okay, here is who they're buying from, Here is who they're selling from. Here is why they are buying from not necessarily this person, but these type of companies. And here is why they're selling to these type of companies. Once you understand that, so that's kind of the distinction maybe that you're making there, is that you're saying, hey, I need to understand this because there's a lot of people talk about mastery, and that's why I wanted to tease this out with you, because it's not so much technical mastery, because there are people who are great at that, and if you can do that, so be it. But understanding the value chain is highly important, because when you walk into those meetings, you need to know what kind of people are going to sell to, and you may also already have contacts that are at those companies, but in different departments. So you might know who they're selling to. It's just the wrong department, and then you can pivot, say, okay, hey, I know you guys are wanting to sell to this type of company. I know some folks over there. Let me see if I can help bridge these connections for you.
Absolutely. And then it also opens up opportunities, just like this morning, I sent you, Ryan, I sent you an email that's had a pitch deck from a company that you and I actually both happen to know. But, I sent that same email to a couple of others, and all it said was, hey, this is a pitch deck from a group that I've networked with before. I really like what they're doing. Love the team. Would love to bring them some business. Take a look at it and let's talk about it. And you can't get to that point. I can't send you the pitch deck and solicit commentary or feedback or want to see what you can bring to the table unless I'm confident that you have an industry basis and a knowledge base to be able to add to the conversation.
Right. One of the deals that I'm working on, and we've talked about a little bit offline, is kind of getting into the power space, the electricity, if you will. And it's interesting because it's something that I don't really fully understand how the value chain works there. And it is tough because I see some value in what I'm being told. I'm trying to remember that I'm being told information I can't verify independently. So that's kind of tough. And then on the opposite side, I'm not exactly sure who to contact at these companies without sounding like a total buffoon right out the gate. And so you're trying to source this out, but you can see the potential for value. But if you don't know how the value chain works, it really can just put the cog in the wheel. And so I think working through that process, and the bigger the company, obviously like ExxonMobil, it's really hard because they got so many business units as well.
So I'm curious. Yeah, no, I'm curious, Ryan. So I know how I would approach that, and I know and I think I have a pretty good idea how you would approach that in terms of, okay, so I don't know anything about, let's pick solar or wind. I don't know anything about solar, right? And I want to learn about solar. I think that you and I are at a point where we have connections or can facilitate introductions to go find the stakeholders that you want to talk to and have a conversation with them one-on-one to garner that information. My question to you is, if you're just kind of starting out and you don't have the network that you and I do, but you're hungry for knowledge, how would you go about learning from the ground up something that you have no knowledge base on, you can't really reach out to industry experts on and get their time? How would you recommend somebody start from the ground up and get acclimated?
Yeah, I would try to find, in oil and gas, there's a handful of books. Let's just use that because I don't know about solar particularly. I'm sure there are as well. But oil and gas, and I've got them somewhere in my office, there's a handful of books that are called, a non-technical guide to petrochemicals, a non-technical guide to upstream, a non-technical guide to midstream. That's non-technical. That's for guys like me and you. There's a book on here on, over there. I can find it later. It breaks down very high level, just kind of oil and gas from it's not even 30,000, maybe 50,000 feet. And it gives you short functional definitions. And so when I'm trying to get into a new space, I need those short functional definitions that I can throw out a term, and kind of know where artificial lift fits into stuff because I got it from a book, but I don't fully understand how artificial lift works. I can pick that up. So I would start there. And then I would try to find, commentary that's at this level, other podcasts. I would want to stay away from technical presentation because that's full of jargon and insider information. But stuff like this where it's kind of low key and people talking, because then you can get the industry experts talking, but at a level hopefully that's more closer to you. So I just kind of use those two sources to start there, and then it sounds cliche, but Google it. Google the problems. But the non-technical guides I have found to be very helpful because I have them, and if there's a part of the industry I'm not familiar with, I just go to the index, I search that term, and I go read the term, and then I go, okay, now I kind of know where I'm going, and then I can kind of start putting together the building blocks, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the things that I loved about what you said was the piece about you need to have, if you're trying to have a conversation about something, you need to be able to conceptually understand, where the pieces of the puzzle plug in. And I think that's really valuable because from there, you're able to, or if you're paying attention, I think that you're able to kind of quickly synthesize the rest of the information. But you need kind of those base building blocks, and so it's really important to be able to kind of key in on that important information and do the due diligence to read those books. And I think another word for those are the energy for dummies books, aren't they?
Well, they have probably some, but they do literally. I can grab one while you're talking here. They have one, a non-technical guide for oil and gas, and you talk, I'll grab one.
No, okay. Yeah, he wants me to talk. He's going to get the book. I won't say anything mean about him. But I think he's actually pulling out the book. I used one of these in one of my geology courses, but I guess this is a different one. But I was. Oh man, I was almost done with the story, but
you're crushing me, I'm sure. So here, I'm holding this up for people listening. This is petrochemicals in non-technical language, the 4th edition. So if you're looking for something about petrochemicals, you're not like me. It does get a little tough at some points, obviously, but this book is actually trying to break it down for folks like me and you who aren't petrochemical experts, but we can use it as a reference. But they'd probably have the 4 Energy for Dummies, and that would probably be a great source. This is probably one step above that, though.
Yeah, no, actually, when you stepped away, I was saying that I think not that exact book, but we used a petroleum geology book in one of my geology courses in school. And it was that exact series. There was I think
I got it on the shelf somewhere. I just knew where this one was. But these have been extremely helpful because someone will call me up and say, you talk about oil and gas. They'll say, hey, I'm doing so and so and so and so, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I don't really know how that fits into the larger scheme, and I can pull that book up and get it out. And because I generally understand the process of how things go, then it helps fit the cog in the wheel. But yeah, I think the value chain thing that was important because understanding who's buying and who's selling and how and what motivates them to buy, what motivates them to sell. That's how we're getting deals done, is by leveraging what these pressure points are, why people want to move things.
Absolutely. And I think the next level to that is not only knowing why people are wanting to sell, why people are wanting to buy, but what's motivating and predicating those actions so that you can start to get out ahead of those things. And then you can start to not only necessarily predict the market, but you can at least kind of start to predict trends. And that can also, if you're malleable and flexible enough to be in different markets, that can also dictate, okay, so I'm going to focus over here because what's going on over here is slowing down a little bit, and being able to kind of stoke the fires that are the most pertinent.
Right. And let's just see if we can make a practical example before our guest hops on. I'm just going to spitball this idea to you and just tell me how you would react to this, just to kind of, shake your head. No, you're going to get it. If you're out there in West Texas, it's probably not the best area to use, but let's just use West Texas, and you come across a group of people and they say, hey, yeah, we're doing seismic survey out here for someone. And the next thing you know, you hear that there's a landman out there, leasing for someone, and they won't say. With that information, it sounds kind of cliche, but that's actually just the kind of information you would be looking for. Going, okay, well, someone's paying for seismic, so they have at least a theory that there's a good product out here. Then they're sending out seismic crews to verify that, and now there's at least one man land, maybe multiple out here leasing for that. Okay. Ben Samuel's at a high level. If you had obviously the time and the expertise in that area, that's information that you'd probably act on. How? A couple different scenarios, not maybe directly, but what are some things that you may take with that and go, okay, well, this is because you can see a trend coming at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I would look at what who the operators are in the area. Are the operators in the area? Are any of them possibly primed to sell? Are they maybe looking to pad acreage? Are they looking to maybe prove up a different area? Are they looking to to drill a new area? Is the area around this developed or undeveloped? What are the type of wells that are coming online? Are the decline curves generally similar? Or are they pretty different? Is this something that's more risky, or sort of something that's not? Is this in the middle of a position for an operator, and they're continuing a program, or is this like, where did this come from? And this is out of left field,
right.
And what's going on behind the scenes, because then that may even lead you farther down the rabbit hole. So it's off the top of my head. Those are some of the questions I'd be asking right away.
What road infrastructure's out there? What power infrastructure's out there? What pipeline infrastructure's out there? And we could go on, but that's because you start when you understand kind of where seismic fits into and leasing fits into the value chain. You can kind of predict what's going to be needed down the road. And so you can just take that example and plug it into different industries, but it's the same thing. Once we understand what seismic does, we understand what leasing does, we understand the end goal is to eventually drill. And so when you have that information, it's not like it's rocket science. It's just, okay, well, if they do actually, buy this acreage and they do drill it, these are the things they're going to need. And then the more of that you understand, the more potential for opportunities you have to exploit because, well, you might not be into electrical power, but you might be into road contracts or something like that. And, you could, whatever it might be. But if you don't understand the value chain and how it goes from A to B and so forth, it makes it very tough to understand how you can exploit opportunities. So
as an example, just to kind of wrap it up or to sum it up with another quick vignette, I know a group that the way that they made their money, the way that they qualified or pre-qualified where they were going to go after minerals was that they would scrape data for hotel rooms, occupancy, and rates, and cross-reference that with traffic data. And that would key them in on, and this was years ago when it wasn't as hot, but that would key them in on a new area where landmen had just flocked to and were running title, and they would get out in front of where they thought the operator was going to go, and they made a killing. I mean, and so yeah, it can be, you can think completely outside the box, but still get there.
No, exactly. That's the hotel thing. Obviously, with the Permian boom, the hotel thing was something of concern. Obviously, there's a lot of other concerns that have been there as well with water and infrastructure and various things. But no, I think one of the things that's why I'm glad we worked through this because it can be very daunting. It can be very daunting, and you can start the value chain at a very high level, which is in the oil and gas business is upstream sells to midstream, midstream sells to downstream. You can start at a very high level to figure out value chains and then start breaking down how those things play out. Why does upstream sell to midstream? Do they ever partner? How do they partner? Why do they partner? When do they partner? Do some companies do both? You could really start asking a lot of questions and find those answers.
Absolutely. No, actually, I was just going to say for anyone listening, I don't have a problem admitting it took me a while to really grasp the demarcation between upstream, midstream, and downstream. And even more so, I would argue that in today's market, there's so much commingling between them that there's really, I don't think there's really a hard line on any of that anyways. I think there's so much that is necessary, if I could talk, to do together that it's all kind of one value chain in and of itself.
No, I agree 100%. So as I mentioned a minute ago, we do have on a guest Mark LaCour, who is the editor-in-chief at Oil and Gas Global Network, a gentleman I've known for 3, 4, 5 years now, and kind of helped me get my
5 years.
Yeah, helped me get my start in the podcasting back with the Global Energy Leaders podcast way back when. Mark was the first guest, the 50th guest, and maybe the 100th guest. I can't remember. He was significant for those shows. Mark, I always appreciate you. You're always willing to help folks out and lend your expertise. Thank you for coming on, sir. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Well, let's get right into it. This show, we talk about doing deals. Ben and I were just about value chain and trying to understand some of that stuff, but give maybe the audience who's not familiar with you a 30-second background of who you are, kind of some of the deals that you've seen or put together or been a part of, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I got my start 20 some odd years ago in sales with the phone company in the East. And over my sales career, I think I've closed about $300 and some odd million worth of business in total. In every place there's oil in the world, the North Sea, the Middle East, South America, the US, Canada, Europe, whatever. And one of the things that's really interesting that even though you're all over the world in this industry, and it's truly a global industry, not international. There is a difference. It's still the industry of people doing business with people, and that goes down to sales. So yes, you get beat up by procurement. Yes, supply chains will try to get you to lower your prices, but at the end of the day, you shake hands with somebody that you help solve a problem, and that's awesome.
Okay, and so real quick now, obviously you have a ton of podcasts at the Oil and Gas Global Network. Let's just kind of go through those real quick. So we'll link to all of them in the show notes, but just kind of tell people where you're at and what all you're talking about.
Hi, Ethan. Son just walked in from high school.
Hey, Ethan.
Speaking of deals, he is in a business entrepreneurship in Fort Bend ISD in high school. They had over 2,700 students apply for that. For 40 seats, he made the cut.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome?
Wow.
Nice. That's
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah, and what I'm really doing is trying to avoid your question because, Ryan, we've grown so much. I can't remember all the podcasts we have. Let's see if I could do it. Oil and gas this week.
Oil and gas this week.
S&E.
Yeah.
Oil and gas industry leaders. Oil and gas legal risk. Oil and gas technology, oil and gas onshore, and we're launching oil and gas offshore the 1st of October.
Oil and gas offshore. I actually know the host of that, Andy Lash, and so he's a great guy. And I'm excited to hear about his podcast.
We ran a contest on LinkedIn to find the host for that, and we broke LinkedIn for about an hour.
Wow.
It was insane. And of the 15 or 20 that you can see publicly, you don't see the other 150 that were sent to me privately. So it was a good time, and Andy's a great guy. We're really looking forward to launching that show.
Yeah. So Mark, one of the things we were talking about, let's get your opinion on this. We're talking about, you're kind of put together a deal, understanding the value chain, who's buying from who's selling to who, seems to be, if you're especially trying to get into a new business market, is one of the things you probably need to lead off with, because you don't understand, who they're buying from and who they're selling to and what motivates that. It makes it very hard. You've dealt with these large companies. You said $300 million plus in sales. How did you go through that vetting process of learning which business units to target, what motivates them, what gets them, to answer the phone and to meet with you and pushes you down the road on the sales process?
Well, in the beginning, I would just talk to anybody that had Chevron on their card. I didn't know where they fit, what they did. It's just, well, you have a conversation with me, I'll buy lunch or drinks or whatever. And back in the 90s, that worked a little bit, right? It's you would socialize, and if you weren't talking to the right person, they would introduce you to the right person. But sales has changed in 2019. So all of the big companies, so when I got started, there really was a decision maker. There was the one guy that bought telecom services at Exxon or at Chevron or at Halliburton or whatever. Companies learned, though, in the last decade that having that guy, the decision maker, was bad for the company. Because if I played golf and I was friends with the guy that bought my stuff, it may not be best for the company. You fast forward till now, there is no longer a decision maker. It's a decision-making team. Now, that team either may be formal or informal. Regardless, whenever you go into a meeting and there's 3 or 4 guys in that room, that's half of the decision-making team. I guarantee you. The other half aren't even in that room. So trying to figure out who those people are and what the reason they're motivated to engage with you is hard, because especially supply chain, they don't want you talking to the decision-making team, which is really backwards. Supply chain should want you to talk to them. That way you can give the best solution to the problem. Or once you understand the problem, you go, you know what, I can't help you with this, right? But because supply chain wants to limit your exposure as a salesperson, it's really hard for you to do that record ordering and figure out who's there and what. But you have to remember that every person in that decision-making team is a different driver. I'll make up something silly, right? I'm drinking Starbucks coffee right now, right? Big fan of Starbucks. So let's say I was Starbucks and I was trying to sell to Chevron. Well, I could go to Chevron HR and go, look, it's been proven scientifically that a little bit of caffeine increases worker productivity. So how about you buy Starbucks from me to increase productivity? Or I could go to the portfolio manager who manages a bunch of project managers at Chevron and go, look, my ability to keep these people awake and working longer hours will make sure you hit your project delivery dates and your start dates. I could go all the way up to the CEO and go, look, last quarter, you missed some of your numbers because your people didn't perform like they should. A little bit of caffeine will make that difference. So now I'm affecting shareholder value. So I can take something as simple as Starbucks, and you see how different members of that team have different motivators and drivers. And as a salesperson, you have to understand that.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable, Mark. That's something that Ryan and I have talked a little bit about on the podcast, about being able to kind of get in that prism of what is the other person thinking, and what are they looking at that at this from, and kind of how can I get get into the door. So I'm curious. You mentioned something that Ryan and I don't think that we talked about it online, but we talked about it quite a bit offline in terms of a lot of these firms having this resistance to really having an open conversation to you, so that you as a consultant can even get to the point where you can be of value, and that you can actually bring something to them that would help their bottom line. How have you, in your experience, how have you found over the years that you're able to have that conversation, kind of get to that next level, and what are some of the ways that you've been able to kind of break that barrier, break through those doors?
Yeah, boy, this is a big thing. It's a great topic. I could spend the next 6 hours talking about this. So first thing is, if you're a potential vendor and somebody from a big oil company reaches out to you, they're not buying. They're gathering information. They're gathering data. To a salesperson, if you're inexperienced, you can go, you know what, here's an opportunity. It's not an opportunity. They're just gathering information. Without a time constraint and the consensus to solve the problem, it's not an opportunity. So you want to give a little bit of information. What you really want to find out is why they're gathering information. Is that a problem that they're facing now? And the senior people are saying, go out there and find me different solutions. Is it not a problem now, but they think it's a problem in the future? Is it wishful thinking? You're seeing this going on right now today with blockchain. You're seeing oil and gas companies reach out to the blockchain world and say, tell us about your blockchain product, not because they want a blockchain solution. They're just curious. But if you're not an experienced salesperson, that looks like a prospect. That's the first thing. Not every inbound is a lead. Second thing is you basically need to skip procurement, supply chain. You need to skip HR, IT, legal, everybody that is a chargeback model in the business, because they have no budget. Each year they're asked to do more with less. And if they want to buy something new, they have to go ask the business. As opposed to the guy that's running the North America operations for Halliburton, he probably has, even in this bit of a downturn that we're approaching, he probably still has $20 to $50 million a year of discretionary spend. That's the guy you want to talk to. And if he has a problem that you can solve, so let's say he has a problem that costs him $10 million a year, he'll write you a check for $5 million because he's done netting 5. But until you have that discussion with him about the problem that he has, you're going to go nowhere. And as a salesperson, the days of the discovery meeting, which I hate that term now, is gone. You can't go to this guy at Halliburton. He's busy. He's running a North American operation and go, tell me what keeps you up at night. That doesn't work anymore. You have to do your research ahead of time. You have to walk in his office and go, look, John, I know for a fact that you can't hire enough skilled labor in the Permian, North Dakota, so you miss your quarterly earnings. If I was able to get you more diesel mechanics and welders on site, you'd hit your quarterly earnings, you hit your KPIs, everybody'd be nice. You need to know the problem ahead of time and walk in there and talk to them about it. That's how it's done in 2019.
We've talked about publicly traded companies. I'm gonna get your take on this. Publicly traded companies, you have a potential for an advantage because every quarter they talk about what their problems are or what their successes are. Obviously, that's not the full picture, but it is an insight. It is something I know we've talked about to our salespeople is if they're saying that they're going to do this stuff, well, next quarter, the analysts are going to say, did you do that? And so it does give you some insight. But how do you take that information, because it can be very granular and technical, how do you balance out what they're saying on the quarterly reports or annual reports and take that to try to turn that into business opportunities?
Yes, that 10K is super valuable. Too many salespeople discount that. That's a legal document. That is literally the leadership of that publicly traded company saying, this is what we're facing as is either competitive disadvantage or what the market is throwing us that may keep us from hitting our earnings. It's not a guess. It's not a smokescreen. It's legit. Where salespeople disconnect is that's where it is at the top of the food chain. As it works its way down to the frontline people, it changes. I'll give you a great example. So you read somebody's 10K right now, and they're going to talk about negative public perception is hurting their operations in North America and in Europe, right? That's at the CEO, C-level, suite level. They know what that problem is. They know why it's caused. They don't quite know how to address it yet, but they know it's something that could affect their business next fiscal year. As that problem works its way through the organization and you get down to, say, either the frontline people or the managers of the frontline people, it becomes very tactical. So instead of them saying it's negative public perception, they will literally say, this Indian tribe is keeping us from building our pipeline project. We're running 6 months behind. And if we run 8 months behind, we're going to lose our funding, right? So to the frontline people, it's a different problem. It's really the same problem. It's just different windows into that. And so each person you talk to, as you move up and down that hierarchy, you have to talk about that problem in a different way.
So what are some of the things, I'm going to kind of throw the same question at it, Joe. I want you to keep going because I think you're onto something. What are some of the ways, in your day-to-day or kind of your own model that you do, look at a 10K? What are some of the things that as a consultant you're looking to extract out of those that are then maybe in turn going to be valuable for you to, in your due diligence before you reach out to one of these groups?
Okay, so you have to remember, my day-to-day is trying to sell podcast sponsorships. And I give you a perfect example. So all of the super majors have the same problem, and that problem is negative public perception to the point that states are suing them for climate change. All of them are used to throwing money at muscle at the problem because they're the super majors, and it goes away. That's what they've been doing for the last 100 years. For the first time in their history, they've thrown money and muscle at this problem, and not only has it not gone away, it's gotten worse. right? I know that, right? So I've had very frank and open. I mean, I actually cold call several super majors with an email. I ought to share it with y'all. And it basically says, this is affecting your ability to hire and retain talent. This is affecting your ability to operate around the world. And it's affecting shareholder value. And quite frankly, it is impossible for you to fix it yourself, because if you try, people are going to discount it and say it's Super Major X marketing program. I'm an independent third party. I'm the solution to your problem. So there's a perfect example. I've gotten into heated arguments with the chief marketing officer of the biggest super major out there, had to shut the door because they wanted editorial control, because they're worried about the risk of somebody ruining their brand. And I have to tell them, look, I don't want to ruin my brand. We did $1 million last year. You're a $450 billion a year company. It's a much bigger risk for me than you. And if I give you editorial control, people will discount it and it won't perform. It won't function like we want it to function. It has to be an independent third party. It gives you weight in the market. And it got to the point where I had to pull up one of our shows like Oil and Gas This Week in iTunes and look at all the reviews. There's literally hundreds, if not thousands of reviews of young people from around the world saying, this is great. I learned so much. I love this. I'm in my second year as a petroleum engineer, blah, blah, blah. And I said, Mr. Super Major, is there anywhere you can go online, anywhere, and show me the same thing about your business? And he looked at my champion, which is a VP, and they looked at me and he goes, no. So you got to know your facts to the point that you will stand up, not be belligerent, but facts are facts, and stand up and talk about the problem in a way that you take the elephant out of the room. Most salespeople are scared to go there.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Mark, I want to pivot into something, and I don't want to take too long. I don't want to go on a real tangent, but you opened up something that I've been really curious about, and I don't think enough industry people talk about it. And so I'm curious, how you think about this, or what's your thoughts on, just at a high level. It seems to me that the oil and gas industry, and I'm not talking about the people in there, I'm talking about it as a whole, has kind of accepted this narrative that fossil fuels are a net negative, and has just kind of addressed the problem from a PR standpoint of, yes, it's a negative, but here's why we still need to do it. Whereas I'm kind of confused as to why the conversation is not, at least from the PR standpoint, from the oil and gas industry outbound, is more, the fossil fuels are not actually a net negative at all, and let's change the conversation completely, as opposed to, okay, yeah, it's a necessary evil that we need to deal with, and eventually, we'll go to solar and we'll go to wind. It's amazing to me, and just to kind of put the point out, and then I'll hand it off to you. It's amazing to me how you can go on to some of the super majors and some of these large operators' websites, and on the homepage you have pictures of like solar panels and wind energy and those kind of things. And I think that from a PR standpoint, that puts out a completely diametric, an image that's diametrically opposed to what we should be doing. What do you think?
Oh boy, you talk about me being able to spend hours. I've been talking about this publicly for a while. Okay, a couple things. So first thing, energy is energy. Depending on what the application is, there's different energies that are better fit. Second thing is hydrocarbon is the most important molecule to mankind's existence. It will never go away. The demand for it will only grow. Think of things like space travel. So SpaceX, you know what their fuel of choice is right now? It's kerosene and liquid oxygen. The only energy source that has enough density to get us off our planet is hydrocarbons. Their new model of rocket engines are going to be, guess what? Methane and liquid oxygen, right? So we need to be telling that story. The problem is, and nothing against engineers, our industry is made up of a bunch of engineers. And so for the last 100 years, when anybody says something negative, the engineers never stop from whatever they're doing, raise their head and go, no, you're wrong about that. With the advent of social media a decade or so ago, now you amplify that, right? So the people that don't like our industry, the majority of them, their hearts are in the wrong place. They're wrong, but they really think they're helping the planet. What they don't realize is a couple things. So first thing is, do you know what's the most organic fuel there is in existence? Hydrocarbons. Think about where it comes from. It is 100% organic. It's legacy sunlight captured by plants and zooplankton, baked and nurtured by Mother Earth for millions of years. It doesn't get more organic than that. Second thing is, hydrocarbons are still being made. Not at the rate of the Jurassic Pleistocene era, but they're still being made. Unlike anything else, nobody ever worries about running out of sand for glass or iron for steel. We're not going to run out of hydrocarbons. The sun will run out of hydrogen before we run out of hydrocarbons. And literally everything it takes to make modern life possible, literally everything around you, we would not have this conversation. The internet would not exist without hydrocarbons. Now, from the narrative from the oil and gas companies, they're in a weird place. So a decade ago, think of when BP changed its name to Beyond Petroleum. That was a PR stunt. They really didn't care about renewables, right? It was a way to position themselves in a more green world. All three of us on this podcast right now know that we are the number one industry that's measured by its impact to the environment. I mean, literally, if we spill 4 ounces of crude in the Gulf of Mexico, it's an incident. Go to a diesel refueling station. There's 100 years of diesel spent on the ground nobody cares about. People talk about water contamination. There's never been an incidence of fracking causing water contamination, yet in 2016, there were over 600 incidences of agriculture causing water contamination. We don't talk about that. So there's that part of it. But Ben, we're in a weird place politically. So I just came back from Denver. We launched a new happy hour there. And the month before I was in New Mexico. Those states are following California, where the people are passing legislation which is killing the oil and gas industry. So if you're a major operator, you got a balancing thing. You got to try to run your business, but you also have to look at future legislation. This carbon sequestering thing will happen in the U.S., I have no doubt. Now, I think the super majors have a long-term play on that, and they're actually benefit from it. So if you're a super major or a major independent or a pipeline company or whatever, and you have the technology to pull CO2 out there, which is another whole story in itself, and you can pull the equal amount of CO2 out there that you used to create, you can now say you're carbon neutral, correct?
Right.
What's the next logical step? You pull more CO2 out the air and you get tax credit, you make revenue for it. And then we all know this. Guess what's a great wealth stimulation technique? Injecting CO2. So if I'm a super major, I'm going to have the government pay me to pull CO2 out the air. There's a profit line right there. And then I'll use it in my own operations for wealth stimulation. I didn't pay anything for it. Actually, the government paid me. And the public doesn't see that. The reason all the majors and the NOCs around the world are supporting a lot of this carbon sequestration or carbon taxing strategy is the number one way globally to reduce CO2 emissions is to switch from coal to natural gas. It reduces CO2 by 60, 65%. Where do you get the natural gas from? You got to buy it from the majors and the NOCs, right? So it's in their own marketing plan to go down that route. But I agree with you. As an industry, we need to own this problem. We need to stand up and talk to our neighbors, not facts. I mean, not facts. Listen, not opinions and not politics, but facts. Talk about the jobs we create. Talk about how good we are for the environment. How many people out there know that our air pollution peaked in 1977? Remember acid rain, the smog over LA? That's gone. We fixed that as an industry, right? The BP Macondo disaster, we fixed that. The Valdez, we fixed that, right? We're an industry of engineers, and we have our problems, but when we have a problem, we go back in and fix it. And as an industry, we just don't tell that story in a way that people understand or relate to. That's the value of not just our podcast, but the stuff y'all are doing. We're telling the real stories of our industry, and that's what's going to move the needle.
Yep, that is it, Mark. I know we were up against the clock here. Just final words of wisdom for folks that are out there listening. They're saying, you know what? Okay, this is kind of good insight. One of the things when I first met you, you were going around, you might remember this, talking about ethane crackers and the potential for folks who were there first. And you knew that because you'd researched the market and you saw the trend and you saw where it was going. Give us, we talked about 10Ks, but maybe 2 or 3 other kind of tidbits for folks who are saying, you know what, I want to be a forward thinker. I want to figure out how to be ahead of the curve. What are some other resources or insights that you might want to point them to before we let you go today?
Yeah, you need to I do this. I have 4 hours in my calendar every month to learn. And literally, I do nothing during that 4 hours. It's 2-hour segments to go out and just learn and talk to people. This industry loves to talk, loves to share, especially if they trust you. And that is so important from a sales development point of view. You need to know what's going on, but you need to hear it from the industry itself. Most of the trade rags are biased and information that's actually dated by the time you read a magazine. Most of the stuff, almost all the stuff online is biased one way or the other. So, make your contacts, build your network, use that to understand what's going on in the industry. Like, what's going on right now is you're having the upstream service companies starting to lay off people, right? That's a trend that a salesperson can use to their advantage if they saw it coming ahead of time. And it's not that hard to predict that sort of stuff. Okay, great. Oil and Gas Global Network. Mark has a slew of podcasts is the term we'll use over there. I like that term, slew. He is, as I dubbed you. So when you start printing the shirts, I want to roll to you, the godfather of energy podcasting. I got the copyright on it. I'll be happy to split the profits with you. He's someone who's always been gracious with his time. Be sure to sign up for their newsletter, because the newsletter is one of the favorite things that you put out, that you guys put out, that I enjoy. It tells you where events are, and you've kind of sourced them, so it's not just anything. And then like your happy hours and things like that, you can find all of that there. So, speaking of learning, that's what those are for. Those are to learn. Yeah, and they're free, folks, so sign up, take advantage of it. Right, there you go. Mark, anything else before we let you get out of here today? No, just remember, if you work in this industry, take 5 minutes to talk to your kids, talk to your neighbor about what you do. We don't do enough of that. And if you just spend a few minutes explaining that to people, it makes a big difference.
Yep. And Mark, you are also always gracious with your time. So thank you for your more than 5 today. We appreciate it and hope to have you on again. I don't know, 6 months, a year, something when you can impart some more wisdom on us.
Yeah. See you, gents.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the time, Mark. Thanks.
And once again, that was Mark LaCour with the Oil and Gas Global Network. Such a good guy to always come on, give his wisdom. And I like talking to a guy like Mark, Ben, because he deals with the real big companies, which is a world I really don't deal in a lot, but there's a lot of value on how to penetrate those companies, how to understand them. Obviously, the companies I do with are publicly traded. Some of them, or most of them are. So I do use the 10K stuff, but some of the other stuff and thinking about how they're interpreting things is quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always great to get another perspective, and he's clearly somebody that has done it all, been through it all. He has a number of things going, so it's that I like that a lot. That was a lot of fun.
So the real question is, we're getting close to our time here today. Sadly, tragically, it's tearing me up inside. Will we be back next week? I mean, we've teased that, or should we just tell Nate to go ahead and cut it in half?
I think we can eke out another one. I think we can get there. I think we can. We can do it.
Well, the good news is you sent in a note earlier today that you will be out one episode, so the listeners can get some real value in a few weeks when you're gone. So that's encouraging, if nothing else.
You see those crickets that just happened over the last 2 seconds? That's what the podcast is going to sound like. It's just going to be crickets.
No, it's going to be the sound of the roar of the millions going, thank God, yes.
You know what we should do? We should record the episode in 2 weeks live in studio with, we should do it at
we're building a new. I'm building a new studio. So maybe we can do it.
Will it be ready in 2 weeks?
Well, if it's not, we know who to blame.
You?
No.
Oh.
Wow, that was uncalled for.
Sorry.
You know who to blame around here.
You? Your kid?
Yeah, poor. I don't know what Nate's paying you on the side, but it's substantial apparently.
I mean,
you're not
everything I've seen. Nate does his job. I don't know.
Kind of like setting the website up, unlike some people. Anyways, anything else before we get out of here today, Ben?
No, that's it. I was in an awesome mood when we got on. I don't really know where I've been left, but I appreciate the time as always. This is the highlight of my week. I'm in a really good place emotionally right now. Thank you for that.
I'm feeling lovely. I was kind of down, but this has lifted my spirits.
We're trading off. It's great. No, I'll take the L. It's all right. I'll take it tomorrow. Try it again.
Listeners, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the podcast, I would send you to the website, but that's for a discussion for another day. You can rate and review in iTunes. We take 5 stars or higher. Tell me how awesome I am and how terrible Ben is. Ben that's how he thrives, people. He thrives on criticism. So give us the 5 stars. I need to praise. I'm petty and just crush Ben, and it will all go well. We'll be back next week. I think we have guests on again next week. I think Nate actually is finally working on this podcast and trying to make something of it. So it's good to see that we're finally getting some help around here.
I think you had a recent review on a different podcast. Might have been Texas Oil and Gas podcast, and they mentioned it was like they said something and they said
I already talked about that.
Said something.
Jesus and Fergie.
Jesus is something, and you and I are talking about it, and you immediately just like assumed that you were Jesus.
No.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we had a review that said that it sounded like Fergie and Jesus on the podcast. I assumed that Josh was Fergie. I don't know who Jesus is. I gave Josh Fergie. That's all that I know. Beyond that, it could be Nate. Nate's got that deep voice. You never know.
Don't let the facts.
That is the facts. That is the facts.
By the way, we need to rename the podcast. Don't let the facts.
All right, listeners, it's been great. Once again, we'll be back next week we do have a guest. I would say Nate's doing work, but this guest today, next week's guest are people. I think the next 4 guests are people that I've seen. So whatever. We'll be back for a few more episodes, tolerating each other. And until next time, keep climbing.